and the sky is the limit. We will grow continuously along the journey, helping you develop all of your intelligence, physically, mentally, and spiritually. By doing so, we will produce critical human beings, capable of making a positive impact on social, political, and cultural aspects of life in Muslim societies.
Yes, it's you.
An exciting journey, isn't it? Your journey to an international education will start in Peacock City, a city with numerous natural resources, with huge potential and opportunity waiting to be explored. Whether you want to see classic or latte art, Peacock has everything you need to support you in your education journey. Get ready. It is time to make your own story. At the Faculty of Islamic Studies at UIII, we are ready to accompany you along this incredible journey.
Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018. This campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, UIIU welcomes anyone regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, UIIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts. UIIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as UIIU students and are occupying our dormitories. At UIIU, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, UIIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to UIIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth.
Everyone has their own story and their own journey. Each person's journey is unique. They have their own set of goals. So, what is the most important part of a journey? Is it the beginning? Is it the people you meet during the journey? At the Faculty of Islamic Studies, every journey matters, and every part of that journey is priceless.
Welcome to the Faculty of Islamic Studies
at the Indonesian International Islamic University.
As part of the newly established international university, aiming to position itself as one of the leading institutes for higher learning in the Muslim world by developing excellent graduate degree programs, innovative research, and vibrant socio-cultural activities, the Faculty of Islamic Studies has established a strong foundation since its inauguration in September 2021 by recruiting the best faculty members, designing innovative curriculum, and organizing numerous academic and research activities.
Our journey began with a single goal in mind: creating a better world by providing excellent education and research on Islam and society in the Muslim world. We take the first step by establishing a world-class Islamic studies faculty, where you can experience an international environment while pursuing classical and contemporary approaches in Islamic studies. A journey is not something you should undertake alone. Along your journey, you will walk alongside others who share the same vision and goals. The Faculty of Islamic Studies is a place where students from various countries, more than 15 countries, can experience the richness and diversity of Indonesian society while living with the universal values of Islam. We care about your journey in education, and so you'll be guided by the best lecturers with numerous accomplishments and awards. They are graduates of the best universities worldwide, of both Western and Middle Eastern countries. In addition, all lecturers at the Faculty of Islamic Studies actively contribute to research and development at various institutions on a national and international scale, and you will be a part of it as well. We understand your strong desire to grow and innovate. We are constantly developing academic programs such as dual degree programs and research collaboration in cooperation with campuses in various countries, including the United Kingdom and Egypt. All programs are designed to produce Islamic studies experts who are masters in classical Islamic texts and modern social science. And you will participate directly.
Faculty of Islamic Studies at the Indonesian International Islamic University is the best place for those who wish not only to explore Islamic studies, but also to discover Islamic civilization in Indonesia and the global Muslim world that can make a positive contribution in the discovery of knowledge and the preservation of world civilization. Graduates of the Faculty of Islamic Studies are expected to advance their career in academia, research institutions, policy-making institutions, international consulting agency, diplomatic work, government sectors, and also international organizations.
You want freedom and comfort, and so do we. We provide the best facilities to help you become an active and innovative generation in all aspects of life, both academic and non-academic. You will always have enough space to grow, together. Time will always be your friend, because everything you need virtually. By doing so, we will produce critical human beings, capable of making a positive impact on social in Muslim societies.
Yes, it's you.
An exciting journey, isn't it? Your journey to an international education will start in Depok City, a city with numerous natural resources, with huge potential and opportunity waiting to be explored. Whether you want to see classic or latte art, Depok has everything you need to support you in your education journey. Get ready. It is time to make your own story. At the Faculty of Islamic Studies at UIII, we are ready to accompany you along this incredible journey.
Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018. This campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, UIII welcomes anyone, regardless of differences in religious background,
Cek sound. Gue coba gue.
Cek, cek. Ini mau nih udah.
Cek, cek.
Cek, low, C.
Talented young people from all over the world. So this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as UIII students and are occupying our dormitories. At UIII, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses, and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, UIIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to UIIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth.
Everyone has their own story and their own journey. Each person's journey is unique. They have their own set of goals. So, what is the most important part of a journey? Is it the beginning? Is it the people you meet during the journey? At the Faculty of Islamic Studies, every journey matters, and every part of that journey is priceless.
Welcome to the Faculty of Islamic Studies at the Indonesian International Islamic University.
As part of the newly established international university, aiming to position itself as one of the leading institutes for higher learning in the Muslim world by developing excellent graduate degree programs, innovative research, and vibrant socio-cultural activities, the Faculty of Islamic Studies has established a strong foundation since its inauguration in September 2021 by recruiting the best faculty members.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, distinguished guests, esteemed scholars, colleagues, and participants. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the International Conference on Manuscripts and the Diversity of Islams in Southeast Asia, hosted by the Faculty of Islamic Studies, Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia. My name is Birawa Anuraga. I'm lecturer at the Faculty of Islamic Studies. It is my honor to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for this conference. Before we begin, allow me to extend my warmest welcome to all of our distinguished guests. In particular, we are deeply honored by the presence of Her Royal Highness, the Tengku Ampuan of Pahang, Tunku Azizah Aminah Maimunah Iskandariah binti Almarhum Sultan Iskandar Al-Hajj, and other honorary guests from Pahang, Malaysia. We are also honored to welcome Professor Jamhari, Rector of Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, Professor Amsal Bahtiar, and Associate Professor Safiq Hasim as the Vice Rectors, and Dr. Haidir Bamualim as the Secretary of IIIU. Professor Yanwar Pribadi, Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Studies, our distinguished keynote and plenary speakers, chairs, colleagues, and participants. Welcome, and we hope you will find the conference both intellectually stimulating and enjoyable. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now proceed with the opening and the launch of the Center for Islamic Manuscripts and Written Cultures, or IMWC, to officially introduce and launch the new Center of the Faculty of Islamic Studies. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Zaki Hairul Umam, Director of the IMWC, to the stage. Dr. Zaki, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honored guests, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Zaki Hairul Umam. On behalf of the newly established Center for Islamic Manuscript and Written Cultures at our university, it is my absolute privilege to welcome you all today. First and foremost, thank you to Tuanku Ampuan Pahang, our rector, vice rectors, dean, keynote speakers, presenters, members of the Civitas Academica of this university, and audience for honoring this annual conference organized by the Faculty of Islamic Studies with your presence. Our focus this year centers on Islamic manuscripts, a choice that stems directly from a vision shared last year by our rector and dean. Following interest from partners at DREAMSEA, Digital Repository of Endangered and Manuscript Heritage in Southeast Asia, to collaborate on manuscript research, a vital question emerged. After digitalization, what comes next? That critical question led to the creation of our center. We aim to foster research at the dynamic intersection of philology, codicology, history, even anthropology and material culture, or the current trend of looking at Islamic humanities in general. Through this initiative, we are shifting the paradigm. We no longer view Islamic manuscripts as static artifacts, but as living repositories of knowledge that offers profound insights into the evolution of human thought. While our center places a special focus on the rich, either literary and vernacular written tradition in Biladul Jawa or Islamic Southeast Asia, from pre-modern and colonial periods, our academic horizon remains fully global. We welcome and encourage methodologically sound, historically grounded scholarship across the entire Muslim world without geographical constraint. Today's conference marks our initial step in realizing this vision, building upon the impressive work already done by several MA and PhD students in our faculty. Our researchers, for example, have been actively working with key manuscript tradition, ranging from the 17th century works of Nuruddin Ar-Raniri and Syekh Yusuf Makosari during his Sri Lankan episode, to the 18th century jurisprudence by Aturasani, 19th century royal text of the Sultan of Buton, and early 20th century Ba'alwi genealogical works, and then also working in progress understudied text on later Abbasid mirror of princess genre, and many more. To sustain this momentum, we are expanding our key initiative. The first, of course, Scripts summer course. Following the success of our inaugural program, our second edition, just 2 days after this conference, after today, will feature specialized tracks on Arabic manuscript in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, and then Quranic codicology and manuscript illumination. Second, Feasting Fellowship. Starting next academic year, we will host four Feasting Fellows dedicated to producing critical edition, scholarly articles, and monograph on diverse topics and perspectives such as, first, the reception of the prophetic Sirah in Malay, the second, the transmission of Al-Barzanji's Maulid texts and their performance in Indonesia, the third, female agents inscribing manuscript in Western Java, and the last one, the role of marginalia in the Quran tafsir genre. And the last one, global partnership. Building beyond regional efforts, we are actively forging strategic international collaboration with leading manuscript institutions. And then finally, the launch of this center reflects our commitment to illuminating the polyphonic, diverse textual heritage of the Islamic tradition, as can be seen from our conference topic. We hope that this initiative serves as a catalyst for research initiative, vibrant public engagement, and also new understanding of how this historical texts continue to shape our present world. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zaki, and congratulations for the launching of the IMWC. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now hear an introduction to the conference program and its academic objectives. May I invite Dr. Mugzi Abdillah, convener of the conference, to introduce the program. Dr. Mugzi, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Allow me first to extend my respect to our Rector, Professor Jamhari Ma'ruf, to our Dean, the Faculty of Islamic Studies, Professor Yanwar Pribadi, to Her Royal Highness, the Tunku Ampuan Pahang, Tunku Azizah Aminah Maimunah Iskandaria, to our distinguished plenary speakers, Professor Andrew Peacock, Professor Oman Fathurahman, Dr. Annabel Tehgalop, Professor Fadish Nur, and Dr. Erwandur Tawab, and to all presenters, chairs, and discussants. On behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome you to Universitas Islam International Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin with small but I think important observation. In this very moment, somewhere, scholar is sitting alone with single manuscripts, perhaps in private family collection in Aceh, perhaps in reading room in Leiden, or in museum storeroom in Yogyakarta. The scholar is trying to find out where the manuscript was copied, who copied it, and how it eventually came to rest on the shelf where it was found. I begin with this image because I believe that this is where our conference truly begins. Not this morning, but much earlier, in the quiet and often unseen work of many scholars whose names we may never fully know. This year, that work reached us in very concrete way. We received 93 abstracts, and from them, 22 papers were selected for our parallel season, in addition to our 5 plenary speakers. I mentioned this number not to just to show the scale, but because they tell us something important about our field. There are many manuscripts waiting to be studied, and many scholars ready to do this careful. What has often been missing is a shared space where this work can be brought together, compared, and discussed. This conference meant to provide this space. Let me briefly tell you what lies ahead of us. Our plenary speakers will take us through the diversity of Arabic manuscripts across our archipelago, the scale of what digitation projects such as DreamSea have brought to light, Quran manuscripts that found their way into libraries as far away as the Netherlands, and the careful philological work needed to understand the relationship between 3 Quran from Banten. Around these plenary lectures, our 6 parallel panels will take the discussion further. We will explore Malay legal manuscript, not simply as customary law, but as constitutional text in their own right. We will look at the long history of Akbarian Sufism in Java. We will discuss the quiet and often difficult work of preserving manuscripts, and we will pay attention to small details, marginal notes, pigments, and illumination that can tell us how text was actually used. By the end of this conference, we will have traveled across Arabic, Javi, Pegon, and Javanese Carakan scripts from Aceh to Pontianak, and from the 17th to the 20th century. I mention this because I believe that this diversity is itself important. Islam is not part of the world, was never written in only one script, one language, or one form. Distinguished guests, allow me to place this conference within longer scholarly conversation, one that 2 important scholars in our field have helped to open. The late Professor Azumardi Azra, in his important study of the network of ulama, showed us that Islamic scholarship in this archipelago was never simply a distant echo of Haramain. It was an active part of that wider network. For centuries, ideas, books, and scholars moved in both directions across the Indian Ocean. Manuscript that now sit quietly in archive was one part of much larger and constantly moving network of knowledge. Professor Ronit Ricci, in his influential book, Islam Translated, also taught us to understand religious change through language, translation, adaptation, and the movement of text across Java and the wider Bay of Bengal world. A manuscript, as her work reminds us, is not simply a container of fixed knowledge, it's also evidence of movement, exchange, and local agency. I mentioned only these 2 scholars today, although many, many others deserve to be mentioned because their work captures the spirit of this conference and of our newly established center. We designed this program with that spirit in mind. We want legal historian, manuscript conservator, and an art historian to be part of the same conversation because we believe they often asking the same question in different way. What can be physical form of text tell us that its word alone cannot? This question is closely connected to commitment that our faculty takes seriously to rethink how we study Islam. This doesn't mean rejecting established scholarly tradition. It means recognizing that Muslim communities in this region were never simply receivers of knowledge produced elsewhere, but they were and still are producers of knowledge. paying close attention to the local and material of life of manuscript is one way to turn this idea into actual scholarly practice. This is also the reason why the Center for Islamic Manuscripts and Written Cultures was established. And taking Indonesian manuscript seriously requires more than good attention alone. It requires catalog collection, trained conservators, sustained digitation efforts, and indeed, conference such as this morning, where philologists working on fragment from Konya, Turkey, and curator caring for illuminated pages at the Sonobodoyo Museum may finally sit together and read one another's work, not merely one another's abstract. Before I conclude, allow me to say a few words of gratitude to our rector, to our dean. Thank you very much for believing in this center. To our steering and organizing committee, and to our volunteers, some of whom have traveled a long way to be here. And to all presenters, thank you for sharing today's of your research, ideas, and questions with us. I hope you leave this conference with manuscript you didn't previously know to search for, a college you didn't expect to meet, and a deeper appreciation of just how much of this archive still awaits to be read. Once again, welcome to UIII. I hope these 2 days leave you with new questions, new colleges, and a genuine reason to return. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Mugzi, for the introduction. We'll now proceed to the welcoming remarks. Please join me in welcoming Professor Yanwar Pribadi, Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Studies, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Professor Yanwar, the time is yours.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, our distinguished rector, Professor Jamhari Ma'ruf, all the vice rectors, the secretary of the university, deans of the all faculties from the UIII, and also the keynote speakers, and particularly, thank you for your coming, Her Royal Highness, the Tengku Ampuan Opahang, Tunku Aziza Aminah Maimunah Iskandaria, who not only comes for this conference alone, but also will be presenting her paper. So this is very much appreciated. Thank you very much, Her Royal Highness. I will be short. It is my great pleasure on behalf of the Faculty of Islamic Studies at UIII to welcome scholars, researchers, philologists, historians, anthropologists, and also digital humanists to this important conference on Islamic manuscript and written cultures in Indonesia and also Southeast Asia. This conference reflects an important intellectual commitment of UIII, our university, to advance the study of Islam by bringing diverse scholarly traditions, methodologies, and geographical perspectives into meaningful conversation. As an international Islamic university dedicated to the study of Islam and also Muslim societies, UIII seeks not simply to reproduce established approaches, but also to create spaces in which new questions can be asked and established knowledge reconsidered. Islamic manuscript in particular offer a particularly rich site for such an endeavor. Across the Indonesian archipelago, also the Nusantara archipelago, generations of Muslim scholars, intellectuals, teachers, artists, copied, circulated, and also adapted and preserved an extraordinary range of texts. Yet, this diversity has not always received the scholarly attention it deserves. And therefore, this conference that focuses on the study of Islam has historically been shaped by particular centers of knowledge production and also established categories of analysis. The faculty is therefore especially pleased to host this conference that brings this perspective together. So we really hope that this conference will foster productive encounters across disciplines and generations, uncover overlooked dimensions of Indonesia's and Nusantara's Islamic intellectual heritage, and generate new questions about the production, circulation, and preservation of knowledge across Southeast Asia. Once again, I, on behalf of the Faculty of Islamic Studies, warmly welcome all participants to IIIU. I wish you a stimulating and also productive conference, and hope in the end that our gathering will inspire new scholarship, collaboration, and pathways for understanding the manuscript, written cultures, and intellectual tradition of the Islamic world. So hopefully in the end, our conference will also, publish, these selected papers in the end that will be, the same like our conference last year in decolonizing social sciences and humanities, in which a publication, an edited volume, will be published very soon, hopefully this month. So this conference is also looking for the best selected papers in order to be published as an edited volume. So everyone, particularly the speakers and also the participants, enjoy this conference. Hopefully in the end it will be fruitful. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Yanwar, for the insightful words. Now, please give a warm welcome to Professor Jamhari, Rector of Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Professor Jamhari, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'inu ala umuri dunya waddin. Assalatu wassalamu asrofil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain wa ba'du. Distinguished scholars, researchers, colleagues, and participants, Her Royal Highness the Tengku Ampuan of Pahang, Tunku Azizah Aminah Maimunah Iskandaria, binti almarhum Sultan Iskandar Al-Hajj. It is a great honor and pleasure to welcome you to Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia for this important conference on manuscripts and the diversity of Islam in Southeast Asia. We are especially honored by the presence of Her Royal Highness, our 5 featured speakers, and 22 presenters and scholars from different disciplines, institutions, and intellectual traditions who have gathered here to explore a field that is deeply connected to the history and development of Islam in our region. We are particularly pleased to welcome our 5 featured speakers, Professor Andrew Peacock from the University of St. Andrews, UK, Dr. Annabel T. Gallup from the British Library, Professor Faris Anur from our own university, Professor Oman Fathurahman from UIII Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, and Dr. Irwan Nurtawab from UIIN Jurai Siwo Lampung, Indonesia. Well, I have to give a special note to Ibu Dr. Annabel T. Gallup. Welcome to our university. I remember I visited you in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, to learn from you how to build a good library and also museum. And I think we already built a good library here, and it is one of the iconic building and iconic library in Indonesia. I hope if you have time, please visit the library because you are part of the history of that library. Their diverse expertise and perspective will enrich our conversation and help illuminate the many dimensions of Islamic manuscript tradition in Southeast Asia. Manuscripts are much more than historical documents. They are records of intellectual journeys, scholarly networks, educational traditions, and cultural encounters. Across the Indonesian archipelago and Southeast Asia, generations of scholars, teachers, scribes, and communities produced, circulated, adapted, and preserved a remarkable body of Islamic knowledge. These materials offer valuable insights into how Islam was understood, transmitted, and lived in diverse historical and social contexts. This conference is particularly meaningful because it brings together perspectives from across Southeast Asia. We are honored, for example, to have Her Royal Highness the Tengku Ampuan of Pahang from Malaysia among our presenters. Her present reminds us that the study and preservation of Islamic manuscripts is not confined to one country or community, but is part of a shared intellectual and cultural heritage that connects the people of Southeast Asia. For UIII, our university, the study of this manuscript is particularly significant. As an international university dedicated to the study of Islam and Muslim societies, we seek to contribute to a broader and more interconnected understanding of Islamic intellectual history. We believe that this history has developed through multiple centers and networks, including those that have flourished across Southeast Asia. This commitment is reflected not only in the establishment of the Center for Islamic Manuscript and Written Culture, IMWC, and I like the logo, it's like I move, by the Faculty of Islamic Studies in 2026, but also in the faculty's academic program. The faculty has recently initiated the MA in Turath Islam, a program dedicated to the study of the classical Islamic intellectual heritage, including the study, interpretation, and critical editing on the Islamic manuscripts and other written sources. Through this initiative, UIII seeks to strengthen both the preservation of our intellectual heritage and its continued study through contemporary academic approaches. We hope that these efforts will create opportunities for scholars from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the wider Southeast Asian region to engage with one another and to bring the enriched intellectual tradition of this region into broader global conversation on Islamic studies. I therefore hope that this conference will generate new perspectives on the production, circulation, preservation, and interpretation of Islamic knowledge. More importantly, I hope it will foster lasting scholarly connections and collaborations and contribute to the fuller recognition of Southeast Asia's place in the broader history of Islamic intellectual tradition. Once again, on behalf of Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, I warmly welcome all of you to our university. If you have time, please have a look at our university, go to our library. It is one of our proud library, and also to our mosque, and also our two surrounding beautiful environment. We have 10 deers, if you are lucky, and also a lot of pythons in our university. I wish you a stimulating and productive conference, and I hope that our discussion here will lead to new discoveries, meaningful collaboration, and further avenue for scholarship. Once again, it is your family. When you step in our university, that you are part of our family. As a member of family, then you have a responsibility. One, have to support our university. Secondly, you have to promote our university. And then thirdly, you have to come back when you are missing our university. So welcome to our university. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Rector, for the wonderful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the first plenary session of the conference. Today's plenary brings together two distinguished scholars whose research offers important perspectives on the diversity of Islamic manuscript traditions in Southeast Asia. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Jumana Hazim El Samna to chair this session. Dr. Jumana, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Your Royal Highness Tunku Aziza Amina Maimuna Iskandariya Binti Al Marhum Sultan Iskandar Al Haj, the Tengku Ampuan of Pahang, Professor Jamhari Makruf, Rector of Universitas Islam Internacional Indonesia, Professor Amsal Bakhtiri, the Vice Rector, Dr. Haidar Bamalim, the Secretary of the University, Professor Yanwar Bribadi, Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Studies, distinguished guests, esteemed scholars, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome all of you today to this plenary session. What gathers us today is a common interest in the Islamic manuscripts. But manuscripts are not simply old texts preserved on shelves. They carry traces of intellectual journeys. They tell us about the scholars who produced and transmitted knowledge, the communities that read and preserved it, the places through which texts traveled, and the many ways in which Islam was understood and lived across Southeast Asia. And this is precisely what makes today's plenary session so exciting. We are going to look at the diversity of Southeast Asian Islamic manuscript traditions from two complementary perspectives. We will begin with Professor Andrew Peacock, followed by Professor Oman Fathurahman. Each speaker will have around 45 minutes, followed by a 30 minutes or more question and answer session. It depends upon how active you are. So I encourage you to listen, not only to gain answers, but also for the questions that this diversity raises about the movement of knowledge across the Islamic world. Please feel free to take notes as you listen. Jot down any questions or ideas that you would like to bring into our discussion later. Now, let me ask our two keynote speakers to join me on the stage, please. Professor Andrew Peacock and Professor Oman Fathurahman.
Our first keynote, Professor Andrew Peacock, will invite us to reconsider something that may at first seem quite familiar, which is the Arabic manuscripts in the Southeast Asia. How diverse were they? What kind of subjects did they contain? Where were they produced? And what can their physical forms tell us about the communities that used them? To help us explore these questions, we are very pleased to have with us Professor Andrew Peacock from the University of St. Andrews in the United Kingdom. Professor Peacock is a distinguished scholar of the history and intellectual culture of the pre-modern Islamic world, with particular interests in Islamic manuscripts and epigraphy. His research brings together sources from across the Islamic world, including Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and Malay materials. His work is particularly relevant to today's discussion because of his research on the intellectual connections between different parts of the Islamic world, and more recently, on Arabic literary culture in Southeast Asia. Professor Peacock, we are very delighted to have you with us, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Before I start properly, can I just ask how I operate the PowerPoint? Your Royal Highness, Professor Yanwar, Professor Jamhari, Pat Muksi, Pat Zaki, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'm very honored to be here in the Universitas Islam Indonesia, and particularly on the occasion of the opening for the Center for Islamic Manuscripts and Written Heritage. As the language of the Quran and of Islamic law, Arabic manuscripts are found wherever there are Muslims, of course, and moreover, the late spread of printing in the Muslim world, a phenomenon that only becomes widespread in the 19th century, means that manuscripts remain the prime form of written communication for much longer than they do in the West. And they're used for everything from popular pamphlets to scholarly theological texts, meaning that manuscripts play perhaps a disproportionately large role in Muslim culture compared to perhaps their role in European culture. And it would be very hard to study any period of Islamic history before about 1850, and indeed some areas much later, without using manuscripts. Yet despite the centrality of Islam to religion and culture in Southeast Asia, and of course its enormous Muslim populations, its traditions of Islamic manuscripts remain relatively unstudied and little known. Even today, major texts by Southeast Asian authors writing in Arabic in the pre-modern period usually remain unpublished and in manuscript form. And even major collections of Arabic manuscripts, such as those of the National Library in Jakarta, remain relatively under-researched. So, in today's lecture, I hope to shed some light on the Arabic manuscript tradition in Nusantara by examining its diversity. Its diversity expressed through the geographical connections of the manuscripts, through their content, which can also shed light on other aspects of Islamic society, including even multilingualism, and finally, the diversity of content and their various forms and functions. However, before I get on to these issues, I want to address two important background questions which are essential to understand the subject briefly. Why Arabic manuscripts have been relatively neglected, and secondly, just to very briefly outline the history of Arabic in Southeast Asia, which provides the context in which these manuscripts are composed and circulated. So let us start by turning to the first question that I posed. Why are Arabic manuscripts from Southeast Asia comparatively little known compared to local traditions in Malay and Javanese and compared to Arabic manuscripts from the Middle East? Now, this lack of study is a result of two assumptions in scholarship. Firstly, in colonial times, Western scholars tend to focus on what they consider to be the indigenous written traditions, that is, materials in Malay, Javanese, and other languages of the region. And materials in Arabic, even when produced locally, were considered to be the products of an alien language that was of little interest for the light it could shed on Southeast Asia. As a result, Arabic materials from the region were relatively little studied. But they also, as a result, remained unknown to scholars working in the broader field of Arabic studies, whose work continued to focus largely on materials in Western and Middle Eastern collections. Even in the post-colonial period, this scholarly division has continued and has influenced a widespread assumption in scholarship on Southeast Asia that Arabic texts were incomprehensible to most Southeast Asians and accessible only to religious specialists. So, for example, the famous anthropologist Benedict Anderson, whose works on Java have been so influential, described Arabic in the following terms. Arabic was maintained as a language of sacred rituals precisely because Arabic was not understood. The whole point of a spiritual ritual in an uncomprehended language is that it manifests power and implies a deliberately non-rationalist mode of cognition. And this represents, even in the second half of the 20th century, a continuation of this sort of colonial mindset into which materials in Arabic are not really relevant for understanding Southeast Asia. One of the results of this is that even today, the principal catalogue of the Arabic manuscripts in the National Library in Jakarta is a very old book indeed, some 150 years old, and it's in Latin, a language not widely known to those working on Southeast Asia. So we have a whole series of factors which discourage research. The inaccessibility of basic research resources, such as catalogues, to many people working on the region, and this widespread assumption of the lack of utility of Arabic for understanding Southeast Asia. But it's necessary to challenge these assumptions. First of all, the idea that Arabic's role in Southeast Asia was limited to being exclusively the language of Muslim religion is misleading. Arabic has been used in a wide variety of contexts, and in fact our oldest surviving Arabic script document from Southeast Asia is in Arabic and has nothing to do with religion. It's a letter from the ruler of the Sultanate of Samudra Pasai in North Sumatra, written in 1516 to the Portuguese Governor General, shortly after the emergence of the Portuguese Empire in the Indian Ocean, complaining about the activities of Portuguese privateers in North Sumatra. So this is an entirely secular letter, and as well as being a significant historical source, it shows another function of Arabic, not as a language of religion, but as an international language of diplomacy, one which might be used in this instance to write to a Christian ruler. Similarly, our oldest dated Arabic text is not an religious text, as Anderson might make us expect, but is rather, in fact, a grammar of Arabic, copied in Java, possibly in Banten in 1582, showing that, in fact, far from being an uncomprehended language of religion, natives of Southeast Asia actively sought to master Arabic. And this is something which is, of course, reflected in the broader local textual tradition of works composed in Southeast Asia. A particular concern for Southeast Asian was both the copying but also the composition of original works dealing with Arabic grammar. And the Achinese author of this short poem, or Urduza, on Arabic grammar is also the author of several other texts on the same subject. Moreover, these texts were written and copied not just in religious milieus, or perhaps not even primarily in religious milieus, but also at royal courts. And indeed, sometimes even by members of ruling families. In this instance, for example, we have a manuscript copied by a prince of the royal family of Banten, who were particularly active in the patronage of Arabic texts, but also sometimes were involved in the copying and writing of them. The rulers of Banten were also particularly significant for their patronage of local authors in Arabic, most famously Sheikh Yusuf Khasari in the 17th century, and most of his works, many of his works were composed in Arabic and were written at the court of Banten and were dedicated specifically to the Sultan. Moreover, the sultans of Banten, just like the rulers of Pasai in the 16th century, regularly used Arabic in their diplomatic correspondence, including with Christian European rulers. So Arabic is also a language of the royal court, articulating sultanic power and used for purposes that certainly included religion, but also ranged from grammar to diplomacy. So, works in Arabic are written for a wide diversity of audiences. However, we must also bear in mind that the Arabic written tradition in the region is not static, and the nature of texts and audiences, and indeed the appearance of the manuscripts themselves, varies according to period. And it's useful here, I think, very briefly to review the history of Arabic in Southeast Asia, which I divide into three principal periods. So obviously, doubtless there were Arabs at the ports of the great pre-Islamic empire of Srivijaya, but our first concrete evidence for Arabic in Southeast Asia comes in the form of funerary inscriptions from the first Muslim states in North Sumatra in the late 13th to 14th centuries. In this early period, up until the 16th century, we have occasional references in texts which suggest that Arabic texts must have circulated, although possibly only to a very limited degree, but none have actually survived from this early period. The first original works composed in Arabic in Southeast Asia date to the early 17th century, which is roughly the same period when we get the first surviving Arabic manuscripts. And the main centers for Arabic textual production are the courts of Aceh and Banten, and then slightly later, South Sulawesi. And this increased activity in the 17th century, which is accompanied by the importing of works from the Middle East, which we can also see in the manuscript record of the region, may well be a result of the more tightly interconnected nature of the 17th century Indian Ocean, which facilitated communication. After the late 18th century, we see a considerable shift in the nature of works composed in Southeast Asia. At this point, many of the local courts that had been the prime centers for the patronage of Arabic manuscripts disappeared, as Southeast Asia came increasingly under colonial domination, with the Sultanate of Banten, which was possibly the prime local center for the production of Arabic texts, being annexed by the Dutch. At the same time, however, there was a substantial influx of immigrants from the Hadramaut in Yemen, as well as ever closer ties between Southeast Asia and the Haramain, with increasing numbers of Southeast Asians studying in the region and then returning to Southeast Asia. As a result, the range of Arabic texts written and circulated expands considerably. And in the 19th century, we can find evidence for the use of Arabic in a much wider range of locations across Southeast Asia than we can previously, including the Malay Peninsula, Sulawesi, Maluku, Java, South Sumatra, and even in the early 20th century, in the 19th and early 20th century, in the Philippines too. So, this is the background which it's necessary to understand before turning to the main theme of the lecture, which I do so now, the diversity of Arabic manuscripts in Southeast Asia. So, as noted at the beginning, I'll be looking at three main areas: the diversity of the geographical connections of the manuscripts, the diversity of thought expressed by the manuscripts, the diversity of form and function. And it's also worth noting briefly here, we need to take account of the distinction between Arabic works produced specifically for Southeast Asian audiences and those which represent part of the broader Islamic written tradition, but which circulated in Southeast Asia, either in copies made in the region or in imported manuscripts from the Middle East. And all of these represent essential parts of the local manuscript tradition. Manuscripts, their copyists and their authors were all highly mobile, and the study of manuscripts can illustrate the intellectual as well as the artistic networks that linked the Muslim world. So let's turn to the manuscripts of the earliest works composed in Arabic in Southeast Asia, which come from three main regions: Aceh, Banten, and South Sulawesi. The original works of the 17th century were almost exclusively concerned with Sufism, but despite this concentration on what appears in manuscript catalogues as a single subject area, they provide nonetheless some of the most striking evidence there is for diversity within the Islamic tradition itself. In Aceh, works were composed in Arabic by three famous scholars, all associated with the court: Shamsuddin Sumatrai, Nuruddin Raniri, and Abdaruf Sinkili. Yet their Arabic works primarily concern the passionate debates over the interpretations of the thought of the great 13th century Sufi thinker Ibn Arabi, and in particular, how to interpret Ibn Arabi without falling into pantheism. And these works represent a debate with each other to a large extent. as al-Rawniri attempted to refute Shams-ad-Din's position, whilst Abd-ar-Rauf Sinkili tried to espouse more of a middle course between them. One reason for the composition of these works in Arabic by these authors, however, also seems to have been to bring these debates to the attention of scholars in the wider Islamic world, in which, in fact, they were extremely successful. The Hijaz played a role not just in educating Southeast Asians, but in integrating Southeast Asia into a broader Islamic world, something that we can see again in the manuscripts and texts produced there, which respond to some of these Southeast Asian debates. The most famous scholar of the 17th century, Ibrahim al-Qurani, who was based in Medina, wrote several treatises in response to the Javanese questions, as this theological debate was caused, as did his Palestinian contemporary, Abdul Ghani Nablusi. And we find treatises of Qurani's responses to the Javanese questions being read throughout the Islamic world, in the Ottoman Empire, with copies in places as diverse as Istanbul and northern Greece. However, it was not just these texts which were produced in the Hijaz which reflect responses to the theological debates in Aceh. We even find works produced in Southeast Asia circulating far outside the region. And an example is this manuscript now held in the National Library of Morocco in Rabat, which deals again with the questions of the interpretation of Ibn Arabi, which is actually of a text composed in Aceh in the 17th century by a Syrian immigrant educated at Al-Azhar in Cairo. So all the other known copies of the work are kept in Southeast Asia, in Jakarta and in Aceh. How did this copy reach Morocco? No doubt it was probably transmitted through the Hijaz at one of these study circles in where Southeast Asians and North Africans participated, and taken back to Morocco, where we know there was also a keen interest in these debates. So the manuscript evidence helps us reconstruct a more nuanced and diverse picture of the intellectual history of the period, one where it is not simply the case, as is often portrayed, of Southeast Asians being taught in the Middle East and then bringing the knowledge they acquired there back to Southeast Asia, but rather of texts originally destined for Southeast Asian audiences having a much wider impact across the Dar al-Islam, as the debates that the theological debates that raged in Aceh had a broader relevance in the period. Arabic could also act as a medium through which material in other languages of the Islamic world was transmitted to Southeast Asian audiences. A good example is this text, which was translated in Aceh, originally under the rule of Sultana Safiyat-ad-Din in the second half of the 17th century. Now, the text is in fact a Malay translation of an Arabic translation of a fragment of a Persian text entitled the Rawzat al-Ahbab, or the Garden of the Beloved, which provides a history of the Prophet Muhammad and was extremely popular in the Eastern Islamic world. The text, in its Arabic and Malay translations, was radically abridged in Aceh to focus less on the historical narrative, but more on the theology, in particular the idea of the Nur Muhammad, the idea of the divine light being transmitted through the being of Muhammad, which seems to have had a particular resonance in the political circumstances of 17th century Aceh. The Arabic translation made in Aceh under Safiyat-ad-Din was then translated and adapted into Malay, which then circulated as the Hikayat Nur Muhammad, and was in turn translated into numerous other languages of Nusantara, such as Bugis and numerous others. So here we have Arabic as an intermediary between Southeast Asian textual traditions and those in Persian. The diversity of the intellectual influences on Islam in early modern Aceh is also suggested by one of the oldest manuscripts from Aceh to come down to us, written around 1600 and held in Cambridge University Library. This contains texts by the Central Asian author of the 11th century, Al-Ushi, and the famous Egyptian poet Al-Busiri. So such texts allow us to create a map of the intellectual connections of Southeast Asia, stretching in various different directions. We usually think in terms of Southeast Asia's connections to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, which is of course valid. However, the circulation of the texts composed within Southeast Asia and those written for Southeast Asian audiences in Arabic allows us to build a much more complex and diverse picture of the intellectual links of the region, stretching to Afghanistan and Central Asia in one direction, to Palestine, Morocco, the Balkans, and so thus to both North Africa and to Europe. And this picture of diversity and complexity is enriched when we turn to the evidence of the manuscripts themselves. We have, for example, manuscripts, as I showed earlier, written in the Hijaz of works by Al-Qurani, but we also have a much wider range of works in collections such as Jakarta, with manuscripts ranging from Palestine, as we have here. The reading note here tells us that the text was acquired in Palestine, and we also have manuscripts from Egypt, Yemen, Syria, and so on. As well as this religious and geographical diversity, perhaps surprisingly, Arabic manuscripts provide evidence of linguistic diversity. Many Arabic manuscripts are accompanied by translations into Southeast Asian languages, a topic I'll return to a bit later. Others are accompanied by annotations in other languages that attest their origins and their journeys to Southeast Asia. It is quite common in Jakarta manuscripts, for instance, to find annotations such as ownership marks in Persian, which probably suggests a connection via India, where Persian was the lingua franca. However, sometimes we find not just annotations, but even whole texts in Indian languages too, or sometimes annotations in text which indicate that the text itself comes from the central Islamic lands. So one example is this fine manuscript of a Sufi liturgical work from Banten, which contains texts in Tamil, Urdu, and Persian alongside Arabic. And then on the manuscript on the right-hand side, which is of verse liturgical works, we can see that the section headings giving the musical mode are in fact in Persian. Perhaps one of the most striking pieces of evidence for it is this 19th century manuscript of the famous Arabic prayer manual, the Dalail al-Khairat. In form, it's a typical 19th century Southeast Asian manuscript with Malay translations of passages. But towards the end, the Malay scribe has copied several pages in Ottoman Turkish. As he notes, he couldn't understand it himself, but such as his reverence from the original manuscript he was copying, he nonetheless transcribed these to him incomprehensible passages. So this indicates that we have a Malay scribe who is working here with an Ottoman manuscript. And indeed, manuscripts from the Ottoman lands with annotations in Ottoman Turkish can even be found in eastern Indonesia, as far away as Buton in southeast Sulawesi. Now, these traditions of Arabic manuscripts in eastern Indonesia are much less well known, partly because of the loss of some manuscripts, but partly because many are still in private hands. In the island of Bhutan in the 19th century, the sultans of the island played an active role in not just patronizing, but composing Arabic texts. And quite a number of manuscripts associated with Sultan Muhammad Aidarus, who ruled at the beginning of the 19th century, survive. But Arabic was also used at other South Sulawesi courts. A valuable manuscript in the National Library in Jakarta preserves our main evidence for the existence of an Arabic textual culture in the Sultanate of Brunei. This manuscript, which was written for the Sultan of Brunei, Ahmad al-Saleh, by his Qadi, contains not just works by authors from Sulawesi, such as Yusuf al-Maqasari, but other lesser-known local authors, including one written by the Sultan himself. And it suggests that Arabic manuscripts were highly important for the elite of the Brunei Sultanate. Now, the fact that we only know about this from this one surviving manuscript indicates quite how fragile our knowledge of the Arabic manuscript tradition in Southeast Asia is, and also how important the work of colleagues like Fathurahman in digitizing it to preserve these this very fragile tradition is. So let's now turn to the diversity of topics that we find in Arabic manuscripts. So far, I've concentrated largely on Sufi texts, but I want to show that the Arabic manuscripts of Southeast Asia are more diverse than often expected in their contents and themes. And to do this, I will first briefly survey the one complete Arabic library that we have from pre-modern Southeast Asia, that of the Sultans of Banten in the 17th to 18th century. And I'll then make some reflections on the changing patterns of manuscript, of textual circulation in the 19th century. The Sultan of Banten's library now forms part of the core of the Arabic collections of the National Library in Jakarta. And curiously, it seems that almost all of the books that we can trace owned by the sultans were in Arabic, although they often have translations into Javanese or occasionally into Malay, accompanying the Arabic text. These remains of the Sultanic library, which were confiscated by the Dutch at the beginning of the 19th century, give us some impression of the range of texts that circulated in Southeast Asia in Arabic. So, as we can see from the genres represented, we have, as we would expect, a number of Qur'ans, a number of tafsir and hadith and so on. But by far the most popular genre is not just standard religious texts, but works on Sufism. And more than a third of these works of Sufism are, in fact, by Southeast Asian authors, suggesting the significance of the local Arabic literary tradition. As we can see, there are a good number of works on hadith and tafsir, but there are also lots on grammar, 16 manuscripts on grammar. We also have a scattering of other texts, such as the Isaruji, a standard text for teaching logic, but there are also copies of works on geography and wonders, such as the very popular work of cosmology by Ibn al-Wardi, the Kharidat al-Ajaib. There's a famous encyclopedia of animals by entitled the Hayat al-Hayawan, which was a sort of compendium of traditional Islamic law. And there were also copies of works dealing with the occult, including the Encyclopedia of Magic, the Shams al-Ma'arif, by the 13th century North African author al-Buni. And we have two works that were intended to advise the Sultan, both copies of the famous treatise by al-Ghazali on advice for kings, the Nasihat al-Muluk, which was widely read across the Muslim world, but also its adaptation and commentary for the Sultan of Banten, made by the Medina scholar ibn Ala. So what we see is actually quite a diverse picture of the types of texts being read, ranging across a number of genres and no means being restricted to the sphere of practical text being used by the ulama. Now, of course, this is a royal library, so its contents are not necessarily representative of what was being read everywhere, but I think it illustrates some of the range of subjects that were read in Southeast Asia. There are, however, some obvious gaps, in particular in poetry and history, and I'd like to say something about these. Arabic poetry is, of course, the most challenging and inaccessible part of Arabic literature, as well as the one most prized by the Arabs. So it's perhaps not surprising that it was not widely read in Southeast Asia. However, it was not totally neglected. We have a number of liturgical works, and as I showed earlier, the Qasidat al-Burda, the famous Mantle Ode by al-Busiri, and so on, which seems to have been widely circulated. So works which were very popular for liturgical purposes throughout the Muslim world also circulated to Southeast Asia. But in general, most of the classics of Arabic poetry are absent up until the 19th century. However, this seems to change with the coming of the Hadramis. First of all, we have the presence of specifically Hadrami poetry. So one example is this collected poems of the 18th century saint, Abdullah ibn Alawi al-Haddad. And this copy is actually particularly interesting because it seems to have been used as the basis for a later printed edition. And the manuscript, in fact, contains a poem written by the printer in praise of this, in this collection of poetry. Another example in the ways in which Hadramis increased the range of text circulating in Southeast Asia can be seen in this large collected volume of texts. Held in the Perpustakaan Nasional of more than 400 folios, which belong to another member of the extended Alawi clan. So this manuscript contains extracts from Arabic poets, such as the great 10th century poet Al-Mutanabi, which is not otherwise attested in any manuscript in Southeast Asia, as far as I'm aware. But it also shows a much greater diversity of subjects as well. Parts of it, in fact, seem to have been copied directly from a 12th century manuscript produced under the Ayyubids in the dynasty of Syria. And here we find even more unusual pieces. So on the left-hand side, you see a table of sultans, and this is sort of characteristic of the games that the Ayyubids used to play. This sort of jadwal, which can be used for a variety of both magical but also purely entertainment purposes, was a very popular part of Ayyubid literary culture. And the sultans are all Ayyubid sultans, Saladin, and so on. And then on the right-hand side, we find a poem on chess by the poet Al-Muqri. So this shows an interest in much more sort of secular subjects, in terms of courtly literature of the classical medieval Arab states. And it's not the only example, in fact, of this kind of courtly secular literature appearing in Jakarta in unexpected places. So I mentioned earlier that the Sultans of Banten held a copy of the very popular cosmographical work, the Kharidat al-Ajaib by Ibn al-Wardi. In fact, they have two copies of it. In one of these, we find at the end another poem on chess. So, the titles of the works we see in the catalogues do not necessarily reflect the diversity of the intellectual culture and the diversity of interests of the readers of these works. We need to go into the manuscripts, look beyond the main text, and see what things are hidden amongst there to get a better impression of the intellectual culture of the region. The second case I wanted to mention was history. As is apparent from the list I just presented of the books in the library of the Sultanate of Banten, history is entirely absent. Even religiously orientated history such as Sirah, the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, doesn't seem to have circulated in Arabic in Southeast Asia. And these sort of stories seem to have circulated in Malay, Javanese, or other languages rather than in Arabic. Nonetheless, there is some evidence for interest in Arabic histories. We have the translation of parts derived from Ibn al-Athir's famous chronicle in Araniri's Bustan al-Salatin, and in 18th century Palembang, we have a Malay translation of an Arabic history of the Muslim conquest of Syria. However, Arabic texts on history are almost entirely non-existent, but again, this may be because of the limitations of our knowledge, because we can find very occasionally exceptions. One example is this manuscript from Aceh, copied for Snuprogronia from an original, which is essentially a king list, very much on the model of royal genealogies, salasila, made in Malay. But this one is written in Arabic. And so this seems to represent an adaptation of the Malay historiographical tradition into Arabic. And one reason for its existence may be because of the popularity of Arabic in Aceh, where we know that ulama widely used Arabic for communicating amongst themselves in written form. So I give these examples to show that the use of Arabic could cover a much greater array of genres than anticipated, and it could also involve not just the adaptation of Arabic texts into Malay, but even sometimes the other way round. We can find further examples of this in the popular narratives that start to circulate in both Malay and Arabic in the 19th century, in some of which we can clearly demonstrate that the Arabic text is in fact a translation from the Malay. Some of these focus on religious themes such as the Antichrist or the Day of Judgment, others on stories of early Islamic history. But we also have ones which are effectively popular, if moralistic tales, such as this tale of the Qadi and the thief, set in the time of the famous Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid, famous from, of course, the 1001 Nights, which is preserved in a bilingual version in Arabic and Malay, made in Batavia in 1865. And these works seem to testify to the emergence of a broader reading public for Arabic in the 19th century that was interested in works written in a simple style with narrative content. And they also remind us of the diversity of the Arabic literary tradition in the region, but also its distinctiveness, the way in which in certain times and places it's intimately intertwined with the local Malay literature. Finally, very briefly, before I conclude, I wish to address the question of the diversity of form. As you'll observe from the manuscripts I've shown, there's scarcely any standard form from an Arabic manuscript. And in general, but I'd like to make some brief remarks about the physical diversity of the Arabic manuscripts. Perhaps the most classic form of the Arabic manuscripts from Southeast Asia are these interlinear translations characterized by their bold Naskh Arabic calligraphy with interlinear Javanese or occasionally Malay translations. These are rarely decorated beyond the calligraphy itself. The most common text to be decorated is, of course, the Quran, where we have a wide variety of regional styles, and I know Annabelle is going to talk about Qurans, so I'm going to do no more than briefly observe the fact here here. But the decorations of these Qurans attest not just to local traditions, but also to connections with the broader Islamic world. So we can find patterns of illumination, for example, on this Banten Quran, which may be related to Indian or even Persian styles, with this use of this gold-flecked floral paper, which in fact is probably from India, in this Quran owned by the 18th century Sultan Zayn al-Ashiqeen of Banten. And this custom we can also find in other texts from Banten, such as on the right, this magnificent letter now held in the UK National Archives, where we have this similar use of gold floral paper. And as you can see on the left, this is a comparison with a Indian manuscript. So this sort of paper suggests the connections of Banten to the broader Islamic world. Occasionally, we find other texts which are illustrated, such as this magnificent Qadiri and Rifa'i collection of liturgical poems from Banten. Manuscripts of the Dala'il al-Khairat, produced in Southeast Asia, or also may have use of gold and stylized illustrations of the Prophet's grave. So decoration largely privileges religious manuscripts, and these have been the focus of research. But we do have the occasional exception, however, such as this grammatical treatise, where, despite being about an entirely mundane subject, we have this elaborate decoration. And this sort of decoration of more secular texts remains largely unstudied and would be a worthwhile subject for future research, even to identify patterns of which texts would subject to such decoration. However, it was above all by It was above all, as we've seen, by impressive calligraphy and physical size that copyists at the court of the sultans of Banten sought to impress their audience with the texts they copied, as we just saw in the Dala'il manuscript. Such texts were undoubtedly intended for public display, probably at communal readings of these texts. But not all manuscripts were intended for such purposes. We find plenty of small-sized ones which must have been designed for private perusal. And some, like this one, are tiny, designed to be carried in the pocket. It's a collection of sermons on jihad, which was probably used by an Achinese fighter in the war against the Dutch in the late 19th to early 20th century as protection. But again, the texts, despite being written on this sort of modern notebook paper in this very unappealing hand, are also testimony to the international links of these manuscripts, with the Arabic sermons naming the Ottoman Sultan as ruler, and they're accompanied by Malay moral tales about Persian kings. So despite the manuscript's diminutive size and unimpressive appearance, it attests the international links of Southeast Asian Islamic culture and its diversity. Let me now conclude then. Arabic manuscripts from Southeast Asia are far from being just texts reserved for religious specialists. Rather, they're important witnesses to the history, culture, and religion of the region, to the diversity of its intellectual influences, its varied geographical connections, and the diverse articulations of Islam, ranging from the jihad sermons we have here to the complex and abstruse Sufi debates of the 17th century. The study of this tradition is very much at its beginning, and the field is wide open for future research, which I am sure that the Center for Islamic Manuscripts and Written Culture will play a major role in promoting. And I look forward very much to seeing the results of its efforts in the future, which I'm sure will represent a major contribution to the field. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Peacock, for this fascinating, informative presentation and for the great recommendations that you gave at the end, and for opening up for us remarkable diversity of Arabic manuscripts, traditions in Southeast Asia. Was very educated by the topics you presented, especially about the subjects and the differences and the reason about why did they move, and also about the Arabic poetry. That's so sad that they don't circulate it so much, right? So rich and so sad that perhaps because it needs a lot of understanding and a lot of memorization, and you need to master the Arabic language to understand the poetry, then memorize it, then circulate it. Perhaps that's the reason. Now we have our second keynote speaker, Professor Oman Fathurahman from UIII Sharif Hidayatullah Jakarta. Professor Fathurahman is Professor of Philology at the Faculty of Adab and Humanities at UIII Sharif Hidayatullah Jakarta, and an internationally recognized scholar of Islamic manuscripts and philology. His research focuses particularly on the manuscript traditions of the Malay-Indonesian world, including Arabic, Malay, Sundanese, and Javanese Islamic texts. His keynote about the diversity of Southeast Asian Islamic manuscripts, Insights from the Dream Sea collection, will take us into the world of Dream Sea and affected manuscripts in Southeast Asia. We are very happy to have you with us, so please join me welcoming him.
Thank you, Dr. Jumana. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Pak Rektor, Profesor Jamhari yang saya hormati, dan juga Prof. Amsal, and the Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Studies, Prof. Yanwar, dan jajaran semuanya. Her Royal Highness Tengku Ampuan Pahang, Alhamdulillah, we meet again now in Jakarta. Our last meeting is in University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur. Saya menjadi saksi bahwa beliau sangat mencintai ilmu. Ketemunya di dalam majelis ilmu, alhamdulillah. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, of course, I would like to thank to the invitation from the rector of UIII and the dean of the Faculty of Islamic Studies, and Mas Ghazi, also Mas Zaki. This is my honor, this opportunity to share with you about the Dream Sea project. I would like to share with you about the diversity of Southeast Asian Islamic manuscript, insight from the Dream Sea collection. As the principal investigator of this project of Dream Sea, and I personally, of course, as a researcher specializing on the study of Indonesian Islamic manuscript, particularly Arabic, Malay, and Sundanese as well, I would take you through our journey of Dream Sea project to safeguarding the endangered written heritage of this region, in Indonesia in particular, and Southeast Asia in general, of course. Mana nih? Oh, sorry. The first part of my presentation, I would like to introduce you about the Dream Sea. Let's look at what Dream Sea is all about. So this is an international collaboration project, a program between PPIM, Center for the Study of Islam and Society, in State Islamic University, Sharif Hidayatullah in Jakarta, in cooperation with Center for the Study of Manuscript Culture in Hamburg University, thanks to the support from the Arcadia Fund. And you can see here that we have board of the DREAMSI, Dr. Annabelle and Professor Jamhari are our board of the DREAMSI. And from Hamburg University, we have here Professor Jan van der Putten and Elsa Clave. And also we have the team from Jakarta and Hamburg. Thank you so much. Some of them, I think two of our Jakarta team also here with us, Mas Alan and Mas Aup. Thank you, thank you very much. Sorry, ini salah ya. I'm sorry. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, our core mission in DREAMSI is to preserve cultural diversity by safeguarding and digitizing Southeast Asian manuscripts. They are in danger due to the natural degradation or social-political. We strictly focus to provide the open access principle in DREAMSI, and we would like to make sure that this knowledge contained in the Southeast Asian manuscript is available to the world. And what makes DREAMSI distinct is our culturally sensitive outreach. We don't just collect, we don't just digitize the manuscript, but we proactively approach private owners through personal dialogue and community participation. This approach requires a deep understanding of local context, of course, in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, and it requires also understanding of the living traditions, connecting or relating to the manuscript, which are digitized, sometimes even facilitating ritual practices to access manuscript considered sacred by the owners, the custodians. DREAMSI networking includes both institutions and individuals in Southeast Asia. But compared to EAP project in the British Library, for example, our focus, our priority in DREAMSI is to digitize the manuscript in personal or family collection, not in the institution collection. You can see, you can see here that this is our network in Indonesia and in mainland in Southeast Asia, both national and international. And fortunately in Indonesia, particularly we have the Indonesian Association of Nusantara Manuscript, Manasa, which is very helpful to identify the collection and to digitize with our team in several universities in Indonesia. And our success is built on stakeholder management and strategic alliance. We have built a vast ecosystem involving universities like UIII Jakarta and other UIII, of course, and Hamburg University, and also religious communities such as pesantren. We have in East Java, Pesantren Komarudin, for example, one of the oldest pesantren in East Java, and Pesantren Tebu Ireng, and international partners like HMML in Hamburg. But also we have, fortunately, our engagement with Ngariksa, for example. This is a program to promote the content of the DREAMSI through the digital platform and social media. And now, thanks to the DREAMSI 1 mission, the now actually we are in the second phase of the DREAMSI, DREAMSI 2. Thanks to the DREAMSI 1 mission, number of Southeast Asian digital manuscripts are now easily open accessible, so you can visit the web, dreamsi.co. Our platform is to digitizing manuscripts, safeguarding cultural diversity, not only to digitize the manuscript, but also to safeguarding our Southeast Asian cultural diversity. You can see here the project result by DREAMSI-1 from 2018 until 2025. You can see there the numbers speak for themselves. Yeah, you can see there we already digitized the 8,000 something manuscript from Southeast Asia. In 7 years, we have conducted 56 missions from 164 manuscript collections across Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia. We have digitized 8,000 something manuscript and produced more than 500,000 pages, all open accessible, all images, all of which we are now accessible through our online repository at dreamsi.co. And the good news is, mudah-mudahan ya, the good news is that in the coming months, we will donate all the digital copies of the DREAMSI-1 materials to IIIU. Yeah. Of course, to be used to be provided as part of the primary research sources to the head of the library, of course, particularly those related to the Indonesian and Southeast Asian Islam. I hope we will prepare it in next month, in the September or October. It depends on the rector and the dean of the Islamic faculties. And in the second part, I would like to share with you the diversity of this DREAMSI digital collection. So as you know, that Southeast Asia is home to hundreds of ethnic groups and remarkable religious plurality, all reflected in its manuscript heritage. Diversity of Southeast Asia is manifested through wide variation in script, languages, materials, content, living culture, and the social status of the text. And of course, for us in the Faculty of Islamic Studies, in the UIII and in IIIU, the good news is that for us, for you who are interested to the Indonesian Islamic Studies in particular, that Islamic manuscript, as you can see in next slide here, Islamic manuscript, both Arabic and local languages, are one of the most significant parts of such diversity. And these manuscripts are connected to other great traditions of Arab Islamic world, as presented by Andrew previously. So in our total archive of, you can see the next here, in our total archive of the 900 texts, Islamic texts make up about the 31% something. So it's about 2,000, more than 2,000 texts. And interestingly, you can see in the slide before, the previous slide, I mean, you can see there that they sit alongside a dominant majority of Buddhist tradition from Indochina, from Laos. Of course, this picture represents a truly pluralistic of Southeast Asia. And when we look at the Islamic collection, before. Oh yeah. When we look at the Islamic collection, you can see here that fiqh and Islamic law is the largest category, 25%, yes, and followed by local wisdom, amulets, of course, occult sciences maybe, as presented by Andrew, prayers and Sufism, Islamic mysticism, and so on. And you can see also in terms of the diversity of language, the linguistic profile is equally rich. While Arabic remains the primary language for core religious texts, we see also significant use of Malay, Jawi, Javanese, and Sundanese pegon. Local scripts were often modified, which were engineered to adapt to translate Islam, to adapt Islamic teaching to the local culture. I learned very, very much from Professor Jamhari as an anthropologist about the local Islam, local Indonesian Islam, local tradition, including how Islam developed in pesantren, in surau, in boarding school environment, and so on. DRIMSI digitized manuscript from various scriptoriums. As I told you that I mentioned about our priority is to digitize the manuscript in personal and private or family collection, not from the National Library or museum. But you can see here that our institution, the manuscript, which are the manuscript already digitized, including the traditional education center like pesantren in Java, Daya in Aceh, and surau in Minangkabau, as well as Sultanate institutions such as Kota Waringin, and especially private collection, of course. You can see one of the sample is the as I mentioned, this pesantren Komarudin in East Java, in Gresik, in Bunga. Sampurnan is, I think, built in 18th century, one of the oldest pesantren in Indonesia. In this pesantren, we found incredible materials, manuscript, like the Qasidah As-Saum, for example, in the next slide, an Arabic poem on Ramadan fasting. And this manuscript, you can see that this Arabic manuscript written by local author, by Indonesian author, Kiai Haji Soleh Sani. Yeah? And you can see here that this manuscript copied by Kiai Haji Abdurrahman, and still there the manuscript, but the digitized materials already online, of course. And in this pesantren as well, we also documented the Shatriya Silsilah. My subject interest is about the Shatriya Silsilah order in Aceh, in Minangkabau, and of course in Malaysia as well, which connect the silsilah, the silsilah of Shatriya in pesantren Komarudin is connected to the primary mystical links in West Java and Central Java, through Syekh Abdul Muhyi Pamijahan, of course. We even found evidence of the connection of the Shatari order in Komarudin connected with the female Indonesian Sufis. One of the female Indonesian Sufis, namely Kanjeng Ratu Kadospaten, the wife of the Hamengkubuwono I, Pangeran Mangkubumi, and she is the great-grandmother of Pangeran Diponegoro. You can see in the manuscript preserved in the British Library that the Kanjeng Ratu Kadipaten has the 4 mursyid connected to the Syekh Abdul Muhyi Pamijahan in West Java. And Surau Minangkabau is the next sample of our institution who contributed to our collection in DRIMSI. The Surau is a center of excellence for Malay Islamic scholarship. We digitized it from Surau in Minangkabau thanks to our colleges, Professor Pramono and the gang in Surau. We digitized it about 266 manuscripts from 7 Suraus, showing a strong focus on law and mysticism, of course, Sufism, and a high degree of linguistic mastery, Nahu Sorob, grammar. And this is some of the Surah manuscript, thanks to the research done by our college, Mas Halim Khairi. Yeah? Some of the manuscript from Surau in Minangkabau already not published, but is ongoing research. Mas Khairi, for instance, he is a PhD student at the Georgetown University in the USA. He uses the DRIMSI manuscript to argue the early dissemination of Akbarian doctrine, Martabat 7 in Nusantara, and the influence of Fadlullah al-Burhanpuri on al-Sumatrai. So this is a kind of challenge of the ideas proposed by the late Professor Anthony John, for example. Thanks to the, let's say, new discovery, new manuscript, it's a great contribution about the influence of Al-Burhan Furi's thought on Samsuddin Al-Sumatrai. He shared his thought in YouTube Ngariksa channel weeks ago, so please visit our, Mas Halim, he's here, thank you Pak Halim. Ada di sini orangnya rupanya ya. Ya, no, before. Ya, yang sebelumnya tadi, ada yang menggerakkan ya, no. Ya, okay. So, Mas Halim, thank you. Also deliver his presentation at the University of Malaya, yeah, in the next slide, yeah. In Kuala Lumpur in last May, here. Mas Halim discussing Dreamsy materials work, such as Al-Tufa Al-Mursalah and Al-Haqiqah Al-Muwafiqah Li-Sharia will be published soon, yeah. He is preparing the critical edition of this manuscript, which he used to map how Akbarian historiography was adapted in Nusantara. I may say that what done by Mas Halim is one of the primary example of knowledge impact of the Dreamsy materials to the academic discourse. Next is the I would like to share you with the Lombok Islamic manuscript. A unique highlight is the collection of 42 Islamic palm leaf manuscripts from Lombok, Nusa Tenggara Barat, written in Sasak, the Jawan script. These include texts like Nabi Aparas, for example, which describes the sacred shaving of the Prophet's hair and is still actively recited during the local Akikah rituals. And one of our most significant Dreamsy materials, I'm very happy to share with you. This is our one of the most significant and still neglected material about Sundanese Islamic manuscript. This collection, initially collected in 1970s, I think, by a French scholar, Viviana Sukanda, Tessier, consists of 536 historical texts that are very crucial for documenting Sundanese Islamic intellectual tradition, both written in Cacarakan and Pegon script, which have long been among the largest yet, but most neglected collection. Interestingly, the linguistic profile shows that the 392 of these manuscripts are written in Pegon, yeah, while others in, of course, Sundanese in Cacarakan. This manuscript offer a unique window into the grassroots of Islamic culture in West Java because they operate outside the royal courts of Banten and Cirebon. Usually we do research on the Satria Salsila in Cirebon, in Banten, but is this collection not from the court, but from the society in West Java. These manuscripts show us how common people interpreted and adapted Islamic teachings. Most importantly, they constitute a living manuscript tradition, as they are still actively recited today during the rituals and family ceremonies to invoke the spiritual protection, for example. Next, the third part of my slide is about who did research, who done research, who used research, who used the material, Dreamsy materials for their research. This is kind of the urgent call for us, for you, for all of us. Despite the wealth of data we have presented, there is an urgent call for more research since they are still limited, though of course significant, still limited number of scholars who have already produced research based on our Dreamsy materials. We are currently in a phase of remapping the Southeast Asian intellectual landscape by leveraging these locally held Islamic texts. Of course, let me show you what Andrew done about using our Dreamsy materials. Thank you, Andrew. So Andrew work, I think, one of the great samples. He used our Dreamsy material of manuscript particularly the Arabic manuscript from the Laude Zainu collection, Buton, Sulawesi Tenggara, by which he highlighted the Arabic literary activities of Sultan Muhammad Idrus, as he mentioned previously, to uncover previously unknown intellectual and spiritual links connecting Buton to Yemen, to North Africa, and to other places. Another sample, similarly, Kang Jajang, Professor Jajang Rohmana from UIN Bandung, for example. I'm not so sure, is he here now? Kang Jajang? No, yeah. Jajang Rohmana discovered a unique Arabic manuscript from the ujung timur Jawa, from Banyuwangi, from East Java. This manuscript containing a kind of challenge proposed by Jawi ulama against a Meccan fatwa in the early 20th century. A local Indonesian ulama challenged the fatwa proposed by the Meccan ulama. Keren kan? Yeah. Yeah, and the manuscript is in Dreamsea collection. And of course, Ibu Annabel also. Annabel has also utilized Dreamsea repository to argue that this locally held primarily Islamic manuscript offer a perspective that is distinct from colonial era collection, potentially leading to complete remapping of Southeast Asian writing tradition. And Ibu Annabel, because you are very interested to the Quran studies, so I share with you as well our Quran manuscript collection. We have mapped the distribution of Quran manuscript in Indonesia. We have 69 manuscripts as preserved in the Dreamsea 1 database. Of course, Ibu Annabel knows more than 69, but I would like to share you in our Dreamsea 1 collection. And I myself, because I don't digitize, I don't only coordinate to digitize the manuscript, but I'm also a researcher, very interested to do so. So my own research, my own recent research on Dreamsea materials, thanks to Pak Kemas Andi Syarifuddin in Palembang, involves early 20th century letter writing manuscript between the Jawi community in Mecca and Kemas Haji Umar in Palembang. I discuss in this research, I'm discussing this manuscript previously also. I discussed it in the workshop here in Kuala Lumpur in the last May. Oh, not in Kuala Lumpur, I mean in Padang, sorry. Not in Kuala Lumpur. In Kuala Lumpur, another topic about Syekh Al-Makassari. I discussed these materials in the workshop of Islamic and para-Islamic genre in Sumatra Manuscript Libraries in Padang with Mas Halim as well. This project was organized by Dr. Mulaika Hijaz. And the same Dreamsea materials also I discussed it to review the Kang Dadi, I think he is here, yeah? Kang Dadi's dissertasi PhD on Hajj administration. About the my review of the Kang Dadi's dissertation, you can find the video on our YouTube channel. Please visit it and don't forget to subscribe it. Put a comment, please. Make it viral. And the academic impact of the Dreamsea material is growing rapidly. To that, you can see here that we have 67 peer-reviewed journal articles citing Dreamsea collection, of course, and about 18 research articles have been produced through our student research program as well. And in Ngariksa, we have also produced 24 episodes on Ngariksa, our digital Ngaji series, to bring these manuscript studies to a broader global audience via social media. And a particularly important collaboration, there is a textual macrocosmosm project directed by Professor Ronnie Terici. Some researchers of this project use Dreamsea material to study the interlinear translation, a bilingual genre where Arabic texts are translated word by word into local languages. So I think this research is very crucial because it decenters dominant colonial narratives and show us how local communities actively indigenize the Arabic intellectual tradition. And next is, I always suggest to our team in Jakarta in particular, I mean the DREAMSI team, not only to technically digitize the manuscript, but please do research on the manuscript themselves. Abdullah Maulani, for example, Mas Alan, he is here now. He is a promising young philologist from our DREAMSI staff. He has used the DREAMSI materials to highlight the intellectual tradition of the Kesultanan Kota Waringin. This manuscript in this collection, including official royal letters and Sufi teachings, reveal the robust Haramain networks in Kalimantan during the 19th century. There are copies of major works by scholars like Daud al-Fatani, for example, Abdul Somad al-Falimbani, that were completed in Mecca and brought back to the region by the Hajj pilgrim. And we are also uncovering the work of prolific scribes. Next slide, I think this one. We are uncovering the work of prolific scribes, not the authors, yeah, because this is the Mushaf Quran, such as the 19th century Bugis scribe Sheikh Zainal Abidin, whose personal catalog of 52 copied Quran manuscript was recently studied by Husnul Fahima, Dr. Husnul Fahima, and Dr. Annabel Tehgalov as well, published in Archipel. And you can see here that Sheikh Zainal Abidin exemplifies 19th century Indonesian Islam's maritime connectivity, with his patronage reaching from Wajo to Pontianak, to Kutai, Lampung, Sumbawa, and Madura, reflecting the Bugis Nakhoda's role in next circulation. His Quran manuscripts stand out for their detailed Arabic colophon, naming the scribe, patron, date, and place, and distinctive calligraphic inscription you can see there in slide. Ya Azim al-Minnah, Hablikati biha al-Jannah, masalan. And thanks to the Pak Fadli Ibrahim, who facilitated us, the DREAMSI team, and Bu Husnul and others. And our team as well, Mbak Lilis Sofianti, also studies the ethnographic side of living tradition, thanks to the advice from our board, Pak Jamhari, he is the anthropologist. So while we digitize the manuscript, also we do, kind of the ethnographic notes. We make the ethnographic notes, and we do research on the living manuscript. Such as the Lontar Yusuf in Banyuwangi, for example, in Java, which is still used in ritual Mochuan Lontar Yusuf performance to preserve local identity. And next is, I would like to share you that our next mission in 2027. This is still a hidden treasure in Pinrang, in Pinrang, Sulawesi Selatan. Our next mission in 2027, inshallah, will target the treasure of Islamic manuscript in Pinrang, South Sulawesi. This manuscript, you can see there, Pa Hilmi, Puang Hilmi Aliyafi. He is the son of the Professor Aliyafi, who is inherited the manuscript. Quoting the Mas Hilmi, 4 generations, Qadi Mohsin Umar's will has kept this mushaf confined to the house, but the manuscript remains there, but its knowledge must now flow outward as amal jariyah. Jadi kira-kira begitu. Maksudnya dulu tidak boleh keluar Qur'annya, tapi sekarang ilmunya, pengetahuannya boleh keluar, tapi manuskrip tetap harus di tempat. Kira-kira begitu. And next is the last part of my presentation. I would like to, of course, this is only one of our newest and most exciting discoveries, let's say discoveries, quote unquote, yeah. This is the manuscript, I think never cited by scholars. I'm not so sure who, I think never cited even by Professor Azumardi Azra, who did research on the Aceh ulama in 17th century. This is the manuscript of Ta'yid al-Bayan by Sheikh Abdurrahman As-Sinkili, which served as a commentary on a work by his college, Sheikh Yusuf At-Taj al-Maqasiri. This manuscript is found in Aceh thanks to the help from Mashkur Safruddin, the director of Pedir Museum, who dedicated his hard effort and his team, of course, to bridging our Dreamsea team with the flood-affected collection in PD and Aceh Jawa and Aceh Jaya. Yeah. You can see there, this is the title, Ta'yid al-Bayan, and the text is complete. You never heard this, even I did research on Syekh Abdurrahman Singkal, Tanbi Al-Masih, but this text is never heard. The Ta'yid al-Bayan commentary of Sheikh Yusuf Al-Makassari's work. And the last one is we have uncovered the previously unknown collection as well from Kuningan, Kiai Hasan Maulani, in West Java, which includes the works like Tanbi Al-Masih, At-Tufa Al-Mursala, and many others you can see in the collection, of course. And Dreamsea 2 now is collaborating with Hasanah Fathurahman in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you to Ibu Wan Jumanatun. She is here as well. Wan Jumanatun Nailia, the daughter of the founder of Hasanah Fathurahman, Buya Wan Shakira Abdullah. Yeah? We are collaborating with Hasanah Fathurahman in last month, May and June, to unveil hundreds of Malay Islamic manuscripts collected by the late Buya Haji Muhammad Shagir Abdullah. About 300, I think, 300 manuscripts. Our gratitude goes to Kak Nel, Wan Jumanatun Naila, whose name also taken from the kitab, Odor written by Syekh Ahmad Al-Fatani, ya. Namanya diambil dari nama kitabnya, Jumanatut Tauhid, ya, by Syekh Ahmad Al-Fatani. Thank you so much for your kind collaboration, facilitating us the collaboration, of course, for scholarly purposes. Later will be open access as well. And to conclude, let me remind you again what the late Pak Tony John said 50 years ago when he described what we call Southeast Asian Islamic manuscript, that is through studying such regional works that a more worthy understanding of Islam in South Asia may be won. I very, very like this quote actually. For those who often attending my presentation, I always quote this site because it's very important. It is works such as this, the manuscript, both Arabic and local manuscript, the Muslim elite wrote for themselves and each other. It is from a study of such works. Now in UIII ini, perhaps more worthy understanding of Islam in South Asia may be won. And the last quote I like very much is, I always remember also when Pak Anthony Reid, the late Anthony Reid said that as the academic study of the Indonesian languages, Indonesian manuscript in Holland, particularly in Leiden University, declined, so the baton of responsibility for preserving and studying this literary heritage must be passed to Indonesia. Of course, not only Indonesia, but to us in Southeast Asia. But Indonesia, I think, one of the countries who preserve the biggest collection. So Dreamsea stands at the forefront of this transition, ensuring that these voices from the past continue to be heard. To end my presentation, the Dreamsea collection is not just a digital archive. It is a testament of the plurality, diversity, and intellectual depth of Southeast Asian Islam. By digitizing this manuscript, we are not only safeguarding physical objects, but ensuring that the diverse voices of our ancestors continue to inform future generations. So as for me, for example, this is Iklan, yeah. I will continue to promote this Nusantara manuscript, Southeast Asian manuscript, particularly Indonesian manuscript, through Ngariksa program. So for those who haven't subscribed it, please do so now. So we hope through this program, together we can look forward the future by caring for the past, menatap masa depan dengan merawat masa silam. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Fathurahman, for this fascinating and beneficial presentation. I really appreciated how you showed the diversity of Southeast Asian Islamic manuscripts and is reflected not only in their texts, but also in their languages, scripts, materials, and we really appreciate how you highlighted the remarkable potential of the Dreamsea collection for future research and for bringing this rich manuscript heritage to a wider scholarly community. Now we reach to the Q&A session. We share this room with experts, professionals, scholars who are interested, working, and preserving the manuscripts. So we would like to invite questions from the audience. So please, whenever you want to ask, introduce yourself briefly before asking your question. And in the interest of time, I kindly ask you to keep your questions concise so that we can accommodate as many questions as possible. Who would love to start?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paris. I would like to ask to Professor Oman about the Dreamsea project. We know that Indonesia is very vast territory. We have thousands of islands and maybe countless of villages and cities. I would like to ask about the priority scale when Dreamsea digitized. What is the priority scale from Dreamsea? And you also mentioned about how approach the private collection. Dreamsea use community-based and human approach to them. But maybe my question is about how we detect or trace which one has the manuscript. Because it's private, it's not in mosque, it's not in pesantren, it's not in university, but in their house. So how Dreamsea trace or detect the owner, the private owner of these manuscripts? Thank you, that is my question.
Thank you so much.
Okay, my name is Anggia Zuhri. Thank you very much for both presentation. That is really very deep and very thick. So my question is specifically to Pa Andrew and also Pa Oman, who's probably already know the question because he examined my dissertation. So my question is about the dichotomy of disciplinary Islamic knowledge, because in early manuscripts, like some manuscript like Aqaid or Nasafi or some others, is actually not specifically on particular discipline. It contains many subjects inside of one manuscript, and it later becomes more disciplinary after 20th or early 19th century. So my question is, the categorization that you both made when you classified this text as belongs to the Islamic law, for instance, or mysticism, do that work as well for early manuscript? Or it's only based on the majority of the subject inside of one manuscript? I hope it's clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, one more question, then we will take the answers from our speakers.
Thank you for the time given to me. My name is Hendra Darmawan. I am a PhD student here. I would like to emphasize that it is true, mentioned by Max Land, that we are here in Indonesia, the unfinished nation, with these huge treasures of the manuscript. Actually, the young generation should be exposed with those the treasures, then they can be proud of being Indonesian. But the question right now, I would like to address to the two speakers. As Martin van Brunesen mentioned that the tradition to study those treasures among the pesantren, how effective was the transmission from the writers to the coming generation, or it was stopped after the author of the manuscript passed away? That's my first question. The second one is about the invisible translation. As Professor Johanna Ping mentioned that many research talk about those manuscripts who were popular or surrounded across nation, among cross geography, but we are still having the invisible translation of the manuscript. For example, in Java or in the pesantren, the Latin translation of the Quran, which was used for didactic purpose. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you so much. Now let's go back to the first question, then we will take more questions, inshallah. So the first question was for Professor Oman Fathurahman. Okay.
Thank you. Faris, yeah, you mean the priority skill? Priority skill, yeah? Priority skill of our team, or sorry? Skala prioritas apanya?
We know the territory is very vast, right, Indonesia. Did you choose place to look for the manuscript? Do you have any category to look this place first and then later another place, or maybe this?
Okay, let me answer generally that in our DreamSea project, our policy is to do an approach of the proactive approach to identify the collection. I mean, we do not wait for the proposal, for example, but we are in cooperation, of course, with our colleges in Masyarakat Pernaskahan Nusantara, in our colleges in university, for example, to invite our colleges to inform us about the existence of the collection. And our priority is to digitize the endangered and affected manuscript. Endangered manuscript mean that maybe there is flood, for example, or they're neglected by the family, for example. This will be our priority. Or in an example of the Paseban manuscript, for example, in Kuningan in West Java, the manuscripts belong to the minority society, minority group in terms of the religion, for example, agama Jawa Sunda. Yeah? So this kind of manuscript also our priority, our priority. And how to detect this institution or this place have the collection? It depends on the places, actually. In Minangkabau, for example, we already have the kind of pattern. When we find a surau, for example, old surau, and there is ada bedug. Bedug itu apa? When we find bedug, how to Kang Jeje? Yeah. When we find bedug, the long bedug in surau, and we find the tomb of the sheikh there, and we find the river nearby. So the manuscript will be there, should be there. Jadi gitu kalau in Minangkabau. But of course it depends on the collection in the places. But based on our experience from Aceh, from of course including the Hasanah Fatonia, for example, the most important thing is the cultural approach. We need to be empathy to the owners of the manuscript, not to jangan apa sih istilahnya itu, Prof. Jamhari, mengkapitalisasi atau apa gitu. Ya, pokoknya we have to be part of the collection. Yeah, so some of the owners like Hasanah Fatania and Mashkur Safruddin in Pedir Museum, they need to be sure that our program is not to commercial purposes, of course, but for research purposes, for knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sekali. Okay. For the second,
yes,
the second part
question
as well, yeah. For Mas Anggi, about the categorization of the manuscript. This is one of the difficult thing, to be honest, how to categorize this manuscript as fiqh, for example, or Sufism, for example, because sometimes it's mixed. I presented about the percentage of the fiqh manuscript, for example, but sometimes in the work like Irshadul Ibad, for example, there is fiqh there, and also Sufism, and also theology. So sometimes it's very hard, but of course we can discuss about this. Maybe Andrew also has the thought about that. Thank you. And the last one. Oh no, the last one I think not for me. Yeah?
Perhaps also Professor Peacock can share insights about the second question, about categorization.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a good question. So with regard to the categories I gave for the contents of the Library of the Sultanate of Banten, these derive from a catalogue that was originally produced by the Dutch after they confiscated the library. Now it seems that basically it was dictated by a local informant to a Dutch official. So the descriptions of the genres seem to be sort of locally informed. Having said that, they are sometimes, it was clearly work which was done in a hurry, right? So it was based on the first impression of a manuscript, based on the cover. So, you know, I have sometimes adjusted it to make it more accurate depending on the contents of the library. You're right, there's a broader question when we come to collective volumes, majmu'as. What I would say is that in my experience, majmu'as with very varied contents seem to be much more typical of the 19th century. Now, of course, this may reflect the fact that there are more manuscripts circulating or more manuscripts surviving from the 19th century. But most of the collective volumes that I've seen, which are earlier, actually tend to concentrate on one theme. So, you know, there will be a collection of 3 or 4 different texts, but all to do with Sufism, and all actually often to do with the same sort of questions of Sufism, or, for example, grammar again. So it is often the case that collective volumes, at least earlier ones, do concentrate on certain themes. But, I mean, obviously, these manuscripts don't usually describe themselves. They don't usually categorize themselves. Occasionally they do. Occasionally the title will say, Kitab fi Nahm or something. So but there is obviously always, these are broad brushstrokes which to some degree are imposing outside categories. So it's a shortcut to try and make the material comprehensible.
Yes. We have to answer the third question, then we will take more questions. The third question was about the transmission of the manuscripts from authors to owners. So I would love to invite Professor Oman to respond first.
Oh yeah. How the transmission of the manuscript from the authors to owners, yeah. Just for your information, that most of the manuscript copied in 18th or 19th centuries, although the text, for example, is older than that, from the 17th century, but the manuscript usually from the 18th and 19th centuries, even early 20th century. So the transmission is usually from generation to generation, not from the authors, except the sample of the manuscript in Pesantren Komarudin, for example, because the author of the manuscript was the founder, the Kiai, the founder of the Pesantren Komarudin, and then inherited by the next Kiai, the next leader of the Pesantren, and from generation to generation until now. And actually this collection also, we didn't know before, but when the public, including the Pesantren Komarudin, knows, aware about the Dreamsea, they inform us about the collection, and then we come to do assessment. This is our procedure. When we have information, we come to do assessment, and then when the manuscript, the number of the manuscript at least 30 or 50, when it's very old as well, of course we do the digitization. And I would like to add information about the categorization. Just for your information, that since the beginning of our project in Dreamsea, we made a catalog of text. I mean, the metadata, our metadata is text-based metadata, not manuscript-based metadata. It means that once we have the one manuscript contains 5 titles, for example, our metadata are 5 titles. So it helps us to make let's say better categorization. But anyway, I would like to invite you after, let's say, for example, later we donate the manuscript, the digitized manuscript, I mean, to UIII, to TIPRAAYU. We hope there will be a program to do such categorization, doing research to make the categorization to
yeah, thank you so much. So he's inviting you to take a part in this categorization process, dear students. Thank you, Pa. So let's take another question. Yes, Pa Faris.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed both presentations. My question is a bit abstract. It actually relates to the comment made earlier by a member of the audience when he said that the discovery and the compilation of these manuscripts should make us proud to be Indonesian. I think we all know that at that time, in the 15th, 16th century, there was no Indonesia. And there was no Malaysia or Brunei or any of these polities that we know of today. So my question is about historical post-rationalization. Whether we like it or not, we are collecting these texts from the present. We can only do that from the present. However, I think it's important to remember that when these texts were written, we can't get into the minds of the authors because they're no longer with us, but it's, I think, doubtful that they were necessarily writing for a national audience. Maybe they didn't have a notion of a national audience. So how should we represent these texts as we collect them today? How do we somehow present them as Southeast Asian? Do we present them as national products of knowledge production? I'm asking this because, as we know in Southeast Asia, over the last 2 decades, there's been a lot of national claims made by many countries in the region. This is ours, and we argue over things like batik and stuff like that. And I think this is an important issue as well, because we want, I think, to also try to reconnect to the kind of world that K.N. Chowdhury talks about in his work, Asia Before Europe, an idea of an Asian continent that is connected via a polynuclear network of knowledge production centers that were actually working in tandem with one another without this sense of exclusive national identity or making any claims of national pride or what have you. So it's just a general question, but I would be very interested in this.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Professor Peacock to respond to this.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's a fascinating question. So, I mean, I think that there's a degree to which we can answer it by looking at the text themselves and the introductions to the text, because, you know, quite frequently some texts will specifically say, you know, that they are written for a Southeast Asian audience, using phrases like Ahla Jawa, Jawiin, or so on. Now, of course, as I indicated in my talk, you know, sometimes, and as Pat Oman has shown in his research on Qur'an, you know, sometimes these responses to Javanese questions, as they're called, had a much broader impact in the Islamic world. So this doesn't necessarily mean that just because something says that it's written in response to specifically Southeast Asian context, its impact is only limited to that. But, you know, also with Malay texts, a lot of them do state, particularly in the, you know, if one thinks of works by Sumatrani and so on, that they are written to bring Arabic knowledge to local, you know, to audiences in the region. So I think that whilst I don't doubt that most authors probably did see themselves as part of a broader Islamic tradition and didn't think of themselves as, and didn't necessarily, certainly they didn't think of themselves as Indonesian. But at the same time, I think that they definitely did write some works which were targeted at a local audience, and these can be identified by dedications and by comments in the introduction. But that doesn't mean that this intellectual tradition should be considered as totally separate and unconnected to that of the broader Islamic world. I think there was a dialogue between them and between, as I said, the Arabic and Malay traditions as well.
Thank you so much. Professor Oman, would you love to add something? Okay, he just agrees. Okay, another question. Who would love to ask? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Ihsan Zaman. I'm from Philippines, and I would like to ask a question to our respected speakers in spirit of decolonization, diversity, attribution, and categorization. So from what I have listened to so far, most of the manuscripts were from a majority perspective, even though the topic was trying to decenter Islam or in relation to the discourse of peripheral Islam as well. But we also have to understand that in Southeast Asia, like what Prof. Fathurahman mentioned earlier, that there was no concept of nation before. And that not because everything is written in Arabic does not mean it is Islamic. Because, for instance, in the context of Philippines, we used to have kirim before we used English letters. Before we were colonized, we had scholarship, and we have proven scholarship that has been conducted, that has been proven empirically by international researchers. So I wonder, to what extent does the study of diversity in Southeast Asia Islam manuscript, does it include the manuscripts written using kirim that does not necessarily represent Islamic teachings, but also socio-cultural or historical narratives that is trying to preserve the cultural heritage? For example, in Philippines, they use kirim to communicate with other scholars from Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Thailand, in Patani, for instance. Because the thing is, in Philippine context, they use kirim also to write historical narratives or even mythology, wherein they used to write odes of the previous culture. I think because I saw the Dream Sea map of collection, and mostly it is concentrated in Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia, but the other Muslim society from other times are not really in the map. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's take another question from Pa over here.
Finally, thank you.
Sorry.
Appreciate that. No, it's fine. So thank you so much, Dr. Andrew Peacock and Dr. Fathurahman for the great presentation. It was very enlightening. So I have two questions for both of you. First is, you've been seeing so many manuscripts, discovering so many manuscripts. I wonder, this is my feeling after, like I'm new in the field, so I've been observing only a few, perhaps compared to what you have observed. Have you found any manuscripts produced or circulated in Southeast Asia written in Islamic philosophy? Not Sufism, not Kalam. So I'm not talking about Aqaid Nasafiyya, I'm not talking about Tuhfa Mursala or something like that, but philosophy, such as by those Al-Kindi, Ibn Sina, Suhrawardi. I wonder if this particular field, Islamic philosophy or falsafa, circulated in the region. Because to me, I'm an intellectual historian, so I study Kalam, philosophy, and Sufism. And when I look at one article written by this French scholar, he said that, in the 16th century, 17th century, there was a scholar coming from Gujarat and in Aceh, and he was teaching logic at that time. I forgot the name of the person. And then people in Aceh was not interested in logic. Rather, they, teach us Sufism, don't teach us logic, something like that. So there is anecdotes or stories like that makes me think, do people in Southeast Asia study philosophy? Why I never see any text on, written by, like Mashai, Ishraqi, or, and other part of Islamic philosophy? And that's first. And second, the biggest challenge for us as a philologist or intellectual historian when we read manuscript, I found so many manuscripts produced or circulated in this region, they don't really put the record of who is the author, who is the scribe. No, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Like so many manuscripts written by Al-Maqasiri, Yusuf Al-Maqasiri didn't write the name. But when they don't write the date of when they copied the manuscript, it's kind of challenging for us to identify when this particular copy is produced. And as a researcher, more senior than us, how did you tackle these kind of challenges when you are doing your research? That's it. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for these questions. We will go back to the first question that was addressed to Professor Oman.
Yeah, thank you. Ihsan, thank you. So you're from Philippines, right? Yes. Unfortunately, we don't have the mission from the Philippines, but we hope in the next mission in next year maybe. I hope we will have a mission from the southern Philippines. Yes, we are aware that in southern Philippines, when we did, Professor Kawashima Midori invited me to join in her project on digitization of manuscript in Marawi City, for example, in Mindanao. We are aware that they are kind of the Jawi manuscript. Of course, in the Philippines, as you mentioned, the Kirim, Kirim script, and as I discussed in our program in Nariksa, actually, most of the Islamic manuscript from the Marawi City, from the Mindanao, southern Philippines, are really similar to the, in terms of religious thought, for example, Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it's similar with the Indonesian thought in the manuscript. But yes, unfortunately, we don't have yet the mission in Philippines. But almost 80 manuscripts of the two collections in Marawi City actually already digitized from the Sheikh Ahmad Bashir in Madrasah in Marawi City and Muhammad Said collection in Marawi City as well. The manuscript already digitized by the project by Kawashima, Professor Kawashima in Sofia University, but not for open access. It of course it's different with DreamSea because there is no agreement to put them online, for example. But we hope next year, thanks to the advice and expertise of our PI, Professor Esa Clave in Hamburg University, we are identifying possible mission in Philippines, and I think Prof. Jamhari's friend as well informed us that there are actually some potential mission in southern Philippines. So, how your question about what extent the manuscript represents Southeast Asian Islam from Philippines, I would like to say that most of the Islamic manuscript from the Philippines, for example, written in the later compared to Aceh, for example, the later about the 18 and 19. Of course, Banten and Aceh from 16 and 17. So one of the most important point, if we do research on the Islamic manuscript from such a region like southern Philippines, actually, is that this manuscript quoting the manuscript from Indonesia, from Aceh, from Palembang, from Makassar. So it means that if we say that in the 17th century, for example, the center of Islam is in the Mecca and Medina in Haramain, and we are quote unquote peripheral. So in the 18th and 19th century, what we call the central is ourselves. I mean in Aceh, because in Aceh, for example, there is a manuscript written by Sheikh Abdul Majid Al-Mindanawi, the manuscript in National Library, but written in Aceh, for example. And also in Marawi City, there is manuscript quoting Sheikh Abdul Rauf Singkal, quoting Ar-Raniri. It means that in the later period, we were center of Southeast Asian Islam. I think this discourse is very important for to do research. Yeah. And the last one from Mas Halim, yeah. Unfortunately, if you look for the manuscript of Islamic philosophy, purely Islamic philosophy manuscript, I'm not so sure we have it in Indonesia. Of course, we have Islamic Sufism. When we talk about the Islamic philosophy, always we have the Hamzah Fansuri, Al-Sumatrai, which is not pure Islamic philosophy, manuscript kind of Al-Kindi maybe, or not found yet. Who knows? Maybe. Yeah. I think this is one of our challenge. When you have Triple IU, Professor Safiq Hasim later, for example, when you provide these digitized materials to our researchers, I think new novelty, new finding will be there. We hope so, yeah. And about anonymous manuscript, I think how to identify it. It's common, of course, as you know, in Indonesia, sometimes the manuscript are not with no identity, no date, no identity. I myself usually try to identify the communities, the possible communities of the associated to this manuscript and so on. Of course, we can discuss it in detail later. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Oman. I would love to invite you, Professor Peacock, to perhaps add about the identification or the tawthiq, the details about the manuscripts. How do you write them down or collect them, perhaps when the manuscript has no name, no scribe, and so on, which is related to the second question of the brother.
Yeah, well, in principle, identifying manuscripts with no scribe and no title, if they exist elsewhere, has become a lot easier with Google. And, sometimes you can just type the first two or three sentences in and you have the answer in a couple of minutes. Sometimes you don't, of course, and then you have to look more carefully. As I think I indicated earlier, the question of how you categorize the knowledge is clearly a problem. There's a whole science of the classification of knowledge in Islam, and it was something that medieval, pre-modern bibliographers and so on were themselves very interested in. How useful are those categories to us today? Should we use them ourselves or not? Do we have to adhere to them? Can we adapt them and so on? Particularly as there wasn't always a consensus. So this is a complex issue. And I'm not sure that there's necessarily going to be a simple solution to it. And I think the complexity of it is indicated by your excellent question about philosophy. As Pat Oman indicated, so, clearly some of these Sufi texts, particularly when we get onto ones like Ibn Arabi and Sadruddin Qunawi, which do demonstrably circulate in the region. They have close links with Kalam and with the philosophical tradition, and are essentially incomprehensible if you don't have some knowledge of those. In terms of pure philosophical text, the only one that comes to mind off the top of my head is Isaruji, which is a very popular, of course it's a very popular text on logic throughout the Islamic world, partly because it's the first step of what you need to know to do kalam and so on. So there's certainly at least one copy of that in the National Library and in the Perpustakaan Nasional, and I'm sure I have seen it elsewhere. I'm sure I've seen it on Dreamsea and elsewhere. So Isaruji definitely did circulate in the region, so there is some interest in the basics of logic, the basics of philosophy and disputation. And I can think anecdotally of a couple of other short treatises which have titles like Jadal and so on, which occur in the Perpustakaan Nasional. But in terms of the sort of thing that I think you're trying to get at, the classics of Islamic philosophy, the Ibn Sinas and so on, not to my knowledge. That could be because they don't exist, but I think we also should reflect on quite how widely are these texts circulated in the central Islamic lands as well. Clearly Ibn Sina is very widely read, but by far the most widely read thing is Al-Qanun fi Tibb, rather than the more abstruse philosophical works. And as for things like Al-Farabi and Al-Kindi and so on, they're pretty rare. So I don't think we should necessarily think of sort of advanced philosophy as something we should necessarily expect to find everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now you have an answer. And thank you everyone for this insightful and engaging discussion. Before we conclude our session, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to our two distinguished keynote speakers, Professor Andrew Peacock and Professor Oman Fathurahman, for sharing their valuable insights with us this morning. May I now invite Rector Professor Pak Jamhari to present a token of appreciation to our two keynote speakers. Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. It's time to conclude. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the end of our plenary session. On behalf of the conference organizers, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to both of our speakers for their excellent and thought-provoking contributions this morning. I would like also to thank our distinguished guests, our colleagues, and all of you for your participation and for stimulating discussion. Thank you once again for joining us, and this concludes our plenary session 1. I wish you all a pleasant break. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jumana, Prof. Oman, and also Prof. Andrew for the fascinating discussion this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the conclusion of our first plenary session. Before we end this session, I have few announcements. First, after this, we have lunch for the VVIPs, including the board of the university, Her Royal Highness and honorary guests from Pahang, Malaysia, and also keynote speakers at Smart Meeting Room. The committee will direct you to the venue. And second, for the VIPs, including presenters, we have lunch for you at BI Corner. Again, the committee will show you the place. And third, we will continue the sessions at 1 p.m. after the lunch break. And lastly, just like Manuscripts, we also want to treasure this historic moment. So for that, we will have a group photo to end this morning session. Again, thank you very much for your participation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, please face the camera. You may stand up so everyone can be captured by the camera.